The War Room. It's America's morning show with Quinn and Rose, coast to coast, 1-800-507-1047. Webpage is warroom.com. And let's get right to it. We have a feminist heads up.
They better put our uteruses in a lockbox and keep their hands off them! Stop all you bitches! Stop all you bitches! Back in the kitchen!
Well, American feminism, just like the rest of the left-wing agenda, is like acid eating away at the structures that support an organized and civilized society. Here's another example of it. This is Christina Hoff Sommers writing in Time magazine. As school begins in the coming weeks, parents of boys should ask themselves a question. Is my son really welcome? A flurry of incidents last spring suggests that the answer is no. In May, Christopher Marshall, age 7, was suspended from his Virginia school for picking up a pencil and using it to shoot a bad guy. His friend was also suspended. A few months earlier, Josh Welch, also 7 years old, was sent home from his Maryland school for nibbling off the corners of a strawberry Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun. At about the same time, Colorado's Alex Evans, again age 7, was suspended for throwing an imaginary hand grenade at the quote-unquote bad guys in order to save the world. Well, in all these cases, school officials found the children to be in violation of the school's zero-tolerance policies for firearms, which is clearly a ludicrous application of the law, but common sense isn't the only thing at stake here. In the name of zero tolerance, our schools are becoming hostile environments for young boys. Girls generally run afoul of these draconian policies, but it's mostly the boys who are ensnared. Boys are nearly 5 times more likely to be expelled from preschool than girls. In grades K through 12, boys account for nearly 70% of the suspensions, often the minor acts of insubordination or defiance. In the cases of Christopher, Josh, and Alex, there was no insubordination or defiance whatsoever. They were just guilty of nothing more than being typical 7-year-old boys, but in today's school environment, that can be a punishable offense. Zero tolerance was originally conceived as a way of ridding schools of violent predators, especially in the wake of horrific shootings in places like Littleton, Colorado. But juvenile violence, including violence at schools, is at a historic low. So what's the big deal? The Bureau of Justice Statistics reports that in 2011, approximately 1% of students aged 12 to 18 reported as victims of violent acts at school. For serious violence, the figure is 1/10 of 1%. It does no disrespect to the victims of Columbine or Sandy Hook to note that while violence may be built into the core of a small coterie of sociopathic boys, most boys are not sociopaths. On the other hand, millions of boys are struggling academically. A large and growing male cohort is falling behind in grades and disengaged from school. College has never been more important to a young person's life prospects, and today, boys are far less likely than girls to pursue education beyond high school. As our schools become more risk-averse, the gender gap favoring girls is threatening to become a chasm. Across the country, schools are policing and punishing the distinctive, assertive sociability of boys. In other words, this is what I've been telling you for a long time is going on in the schools. It's the criminalization of male behavior. Now, there was one school in the UK that we told you about several years ago, had a lot of trouble with disruptive boys. So the headmistress of the school, being smarter than the average bear or liberal, bought them cap guns to play with. They gave the boys guns and set them loose out onto the playground to play, good guys and bad guys, and almost immediately, the bad disruptive behavior of the boys stopped. Why? Because they were letting the boys be boys and work it out. It's chemistry, folks. So across the country, schools are policing and punishing the distinctive, assertive sociability of boys. Again, the criminalization of male behavior. Many much-loved games have vanished from school playgrounds. At some schools, tug of war has been replaced with tug of peace. Oh, kumbaya, my lord. Tug of peace. It's a little bit like France, before the Second World War. Yeah. After the liberals had dumbed down France to the point where they couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. Since the 1990s, elimination of games like dodgeball. I loved dodgeball. Red Rover and tag have been under a cloud. It's too damaging to self-esteem, and it's too violent, say the experts. Young boys, with few exceptions, love action narratives. These usually involve heroes, bad guys, rescues, and shoot-ups. As boys' play proceeds, plots become more elaborate, the boys become more transfixed. When researchers asked boys why they do it, the standard reply is, because it's fun. Of course, if you don't let them have that kind of fun, then you could have the kids go out on the street and have the kind of fun they had in Duncan, Oklahoma, where they murdered a guy just for fun. We'll talk about that coming up. By the way, Al Sharpton, call your office. According to at least one study, such play rarely escalates into real aggression, only about 1% of the time. But when two researchers, Mary Ellen Logue and Hattie Harvey, surveyed classroom practices of 98 teachers of 4-year-olds, they found that this style of play was the least tolerated. Nearly half of the teachers stopped or redirected boys' dramatic play daily or several times a week, whereas less than a third reported stopping or redirecting the girls' dramatic play during the week. Play is a critical basis for learning, and boys' heroic play is no exception. Logan Harvey found that bad guy, good guy play improved children's conversation and also imaginative writing. Such plays, say the authors, also builds moral imagination. Well, we can't have that. Social competence, and imparts critical lessons about personal limits and self-restraint. Logan Harvey worried that the growing intolerance for boys' action narrative play choices may be undermining their early language development and weakening their attachment to school. Imagine the harm done to boys like Christopher, Josh, and Alex, who are not merely discouraged from their choice of play, but are punished and publicly shamed and ostracized. There's a word for this. It's called child abuse. Schools must enforce codes of discipline and maintain clear rules against incivility and malicious behavior, but that hardly requires abolishing tag, imposing games of tug of peace, or banning superhero play. Efforts to re-engineer the young male imagination are doomed to fail, but they will succeed spectacularly, at least in one way. They will send a clear and unmistakable message to millions of schoolboys: you are not welcome here at school. Folks, you can lay the blame for this right at the feet of the Ford Foundation and its sponsorship of the American Feminist movement. Rush Limbaugh said it right. It's the chickification of America.
Stop all you bitches. They better put our uteruses in a lockbox and keep their hands off them! And keep their hands off them! And keep their
I think
Glenn Beck.
if I were president,